Party nerds, 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 party nerds.
What's going on, party nerds? Grandmaster FAQs here to give you a little bit of a taste of episode 2. And I have a question for you. Have you recently, other than the new Justice League trailer, other than the Man of Steel, has it caught your admiration or piqued your interest to really give a shit about Superman? Here we have a alien being brought down to Earth, of course, raised by human parents, as we know, who encompasses everything good morally about a human being. To the point that when he is in a battle, not to say that the man overthinks, but he is extremely heartfelt and not vicious and kind and almost deserving to not only his teammates but his opponents. He will do what he can, as he always has, to stop the forces of evil, but it also comes at a cost. You know, this is somebody who has a personality in the Marvel world comparable to Cap, even though he's in DC. He has an intrigue of his overwhelming good persona. You know, those iconic photos, that iconic art of either Christopher Reeve, that Brandon Routh, that Henry Cavill sequence at the end of each of those movies, of him either like standing there with the cape flowing and the powerful horns blowing in the air, or him flying in outer space and smiling at the camera. You know, what is that perceived for in today's generation? You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people that look at Superman and think that's overwhelmingly fake in a way. That persona. You know, the way he fights is, don't get me wrong, that shit is real. He has some of the strongest capabilities of any superhero in, I say, in both worlds, in Marvel and DC. You know, and he almost holds back a little bit. Now let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about the first Superman, and I'm not talking about Man of Steel 1. The first Superman, 1978 movie, Richard Donner directed, Christopher Reeve. Now, we'll talk about how the United States was at that time period. You know, the Cold War was just about to begin. We were under a ton of threats by the Soviet Union. And as far as in the comic book world, this dude was king. So in the movie world, it was only right to bring him out. And overwhelmingly, again, we saw popularity exuded by what we saw on the screen. Marlon Brando was his dad, for crying out loud. He stood for everything that was good. You know, he had this disguise of just a pair of spectacles. To all be damned, nobody knew who the fuck he was when he was flying in the air. Even his own people. Even his own woman. But, you know, I guess his personality traits were good for that era. You know, the first two Supermans by Richard Donner, Superman 1, Superman 2. First one, of course, with Lex Luthor. Gene Hackman was Lex Luthor. The second one is where he fought General Zod, which was a great film, by the way. I mean, come on, man. How many one-liners could you get out of that film? But then we tailed off a bit. You know, those first two movies were 1978 and 1980. The last two films, Superman 3 with Richard Pryor, god damn what they did bringing Richard Pryor in there. Now, I love Richard Pryor, but why the fuck did they bring him in a Superman movie? It was some bullshit. And then Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, which I don't think a soul went to go see. I think they were almost tapping out of anything Superman at that time. DC didn't know what to do. You know, they didn't know who to incorporate. There was no CGI during that time, so you couldn't really embold the other villains that could be brought in for him to fight. Or see the overwhelming alien life forms that came to destroy Superman in the comics week after week, month after month, year after year that you saw in the comics. They could not even envision putting those people on screen. So what do you expect for the movie to run out of ideas? What do you expect? You were not going to see Cyborg Superman or Brainiac or Doomsday, of course, wasn't even around during that time, but they wouldn't have been able to bring him to life like they did recently. And then what happens? 2 years later, in 1989, right after Superman 4. Now, Superman 4 came out in 1987. 2 years later, 1989. What happens? Tim Burton decides to direct the first Batman movie. It's dark. It's awe-inspiring to the eye. The storyline is beyond crazy. The soundtrack was nuts. Prince killed that shit, by the way. But we couldn't get enough of it. You had Michael Keaton. You had Kim Basinger. You had Jack Nicholson. Shit, even his henchmen were dope. That opening trailer that you saw where Joker pulled out that revolver that was literally down to his ankles and shot at the Batwing. Anything Superman ever did in a film couldn't compare to that one shot. Anything he could have did. It was horrible. You almost forgot about Superman in the first hour of watching Batman. And then they didn't think of Superman again until 2006. 2006. 19 years later. And they fucked up twice. They decided to bring Zack Snyder aboard. And, you know, with all the capabilities that we have in the movie industry now, they decided to do Man of Steel, which was a delight to see because, you know, you never seen Superman put in that light. They had a good actor, almost a great storyline. They had a good cast. You know, Russell Crowe as Jor-El. His father was Kevin Costner. His mother was Diane Lane. Couldn't beat that shit. But instead of continuing on the path of, we just saw our first glimpse of Superman in the era that we have today. They decided to team him up immediately against Batman. Now, everybody has their own take of the movie. I didn't play into it too much. But at the end, of course, for those who have seen the movie, I mean, goddamn, do I need to give you a spoiler now? Superman dies at the end of the movie. Doomsday kills him, just like in the comics. 1992, by the way. Yeah. So Superman dies. So now we have to then see, currently, Superman is going to have to evolve. They have to not only reboot his character, but they have to evolve his character. So there's been these rumors of him showing up in his black suit, like he did in the comics, with the long hair, the beard, giving him much of an edge. But why so? Did we not give a damn about the fucked up little curl in the front of his forehead, or the hands on the hips pose with his chest out, or that, he could do no wrong type moves as comparable to Batman, who we looked at as an ultimate badass and wouldn't give a shit about any fake smiles that he does for the media, because he knows at the end of the day, I got to be one up on this guy. I have to be a step ahead of this guy. So at the end credits, of course, you see the dirt rising off of the casket. Superman will return. But as what? We was it that much of a response by the audience that killed everybody's mood to be like, not feeling Superman no more? It's just not for me. Batman's more my dude. And then you look at the rest of the Justice League, how they've curated most of these characters. Everybody in Justice League back in the day was comparable in the likes to Superman. Wonder Woman had this all-American persona. She fought Nazis, as the same as Superman fought Soviets. Aquaman had blonde hair and rode on dolphins. Dolphins. Cyborg wasn't even a thought. I mean, in the comics he was. Teen Titans had just came out maybe in the early 80s. But really wasn't even a thought. Flash? Come on, man. Flash ain't been this dope in life. The way that Flash is now, he could never be like he was back in the day. Flash was laughable. Just a dude that ran fast. But now look what DC has done to these characters. Aquaman's got super grilly ass long hair and a beard, some fake ass contacts. Wonder Woman is naive but kicks ass. That movie was great, by the way. Batman's still Batman. And Flash is dope. Flash is super dope now. And Cyborg, we have yet to see. Unless you've watched Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go, that's all you know of Cyborg. Unless you've read the comics back in the early 80s. That's the most that you're gonna see. But what of Superman? Now we gotta de-escalate this man and mold him into our morality and our encompass persona to see exactly what he's gonna pull. And what could it be? Who could they bring? Like, if he goes to the black suit, is he ever going to go back to the blue suit? Is that ever going to happen? Does DC have a master plan to get this man shit in order and have a continuous franchise with probably their best-selling character? Everybody loves Batman, but the overwhelming crowd favorite for decades, almost a generation, has been Superman. So I leave you with that. I'm glad for everybody tuning in. Feel free to write your comments below. I am happy to bring this to you, and I will continue on. This is Grandmaster FAQs, and I am out. You can check us out at Partynerdz on your podcast app on your phones, and on Wildfire Radio every Tuesday at 6:45. All right? Take it easy, people. Partynerdz go.
Partynerdz, 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 Partynerdz.